Kalorama, a Recorded Books Highbridge imprint, presents Pillars for Freedom by Richard B. Levine. Foreword by Michael R. Pompeo. Read by John Mclain. The night is nearly over, and the daylight is near. So let us discard the deeds of darkness and put on the armor of light. Romans chapter 13, verse 12. Foreword. It is almost morning in America. Light is seeping into the horizon. Our nation has undergone a transformation in this century that has brought great knowledge, but at a cost that must never again be paid. Technology must not become our god. Utopian narratives, which shroud Marxist predations, cannot become our standard. As a people, we have surmounted the atrocities of 9/11 and have fought for freedom for those who had none. While our nation's intent in Afghanistan and in Iraq was noble, our massive interventions, constrained by onerous rules of engagement, depleted our country's military strength, as well as our resolve. The men and women who comprise America, whose hopes and dreams constitute the mantle that supports our country, have too often been forgotten or have been given short shrift. America's citizenry is the core of the United States. Their interests must always come first. This fact is not discerned by the elites who disparage those who are the salt of the earth. In their condescension, our nation's self-professed overclass habitually claim a faculty they do not demonstrate, which is wisdom. Through a maze of foreign wars in the first 2 decades of this century, our nation's leadership has too frequently forgotten the discernment expressed by our founders that America is strong and secure when we lead by our example and not by our intervention through the force of arms. We disregard the wisdom of our founders at our peril. America's armed forces must be rebuilt and be rescued from Marxist theories, which are insinuated into our military's ranks by being paraded as progressivism or as critical race theory. In fact, these dogmas are levers that mask an insidious effort to destroy our military's cohesion, thereby undermining deterrence, for such a course will hobble America's ability to project power when required. As we search for answers in a new century, we must rise as one people, or we will fall as many. We are a nation of countrymen, for each American is our brother or our sister. Our country must be based on our love for each other and never upon hate. The present time is marred by injuries to our treasured principles and assaults upon our institutions. These pillages are further actualized through intense economic hardships, uncountable protests, and severe international threats. Each of these havocs is due in large measure to the stark inadequacies and to the perilous pursuits of the boastful but incompetent administration that now occupies the White House. Without a sound economy, our country will be lost. Therefore, our economy must be secured by concrete restraints on government spending. Such reductions must be augmented by the elimination of regulatory overreach. These matters must be addressed immediately. In the face of a national debt that far exceeds $30 trillion, America must return to sensible frugality. What is $30 trillion? This amount, if laid out in dollar bills, would constitute 30 million individual stacks, with each stack consisting of $1 million. These towers would each be 358 feet high, which is approximately 2/3 the height of the Washington Monument. Expenditures built upon waste and apathy never make sense for a family, nor do they make sense for a nation. America must return to our moral core if we are to repair our economy by reducing the size and scope of government. To do otherwise is to allow runaway spending no boundary though we know that its derivative is inflation, which constitutes the forfeiture of our nation's future, thereby destroying our children's dreams. It is time to admit that the root of America's problems is not political, but moral. Spending money we do not have, believing that irresponsible actions do not entail tangible costs, and permitting our nation's laws and the solemn oaths taken by public officials to be rendered meaningless constitute a recipe for national collapse. We must comprehend that being an American is a privilege. It is also a birthright for many of our citizens. Illegality cannot be a direct stepping stone to citizenship. Contempt for our laws must not be a passport. No nation welcomes more legal immigrants than does the United States. America must be a beacon for those who strive for freedom and for a better life. But our country cannot be a doormat. Secure borders must be supported by an unceasing enforcement of consequential immigration laws and an application of policies that stress assimilation and reverence for our nation's founding principles. Only with these pieces in place can America be both strong and welcoming. We are a nation, not lines on a map that can be ignored with impunity. If America should fail, the world will collapse, ushering in a ruinous epoch that may exceed the chaos and the poverty that accompanied the fall of Rome. Only by returning to our Judeo-Christian heritage and by embracing the superlative traditions and means of governance formed by America's founding fathers can our country return to stability and resume its illustrious path. Our nation's founders existed as persons of their time and were flawed, for perfection does not exist in our world, and conduct is very often coerced by the age in which we live. Our founders fought valiantly to redirect the tide of their days to the service of liberty and to set in motion the means, through our founding documents, to accomplish what they could not accomplish, the manifestation of freedom for every American, which took the Civil War and the loss of 700,000 lives to compel. Our planet has always been scourged by slavery, which still exists throughout the world and now surges within America due to our porous southern border, which permits human trafficking. This horrendous situation has been instigated and inflamed by the Biden administration. Today, the number of people enslaved globally is the highest in history. Each and every person held in bondage must be freed. There is no more important pursuit. America's founding was not based upon the institutionalization of slavery, but its repudiation through the mandated application of our founding documents. The patriots who established our republic formed the most admirable nation to ever exist, for America has accomplished a singular feat in world history. We expanded freedom, despite grievous errors, for every subsequent generation since our founding. This is our legacy, but it is incomplete. America must never forget the ravages and the inhumanity of slavery, or the detestable treatment of Native Americans that still scars our republic. Franklin Delano Roosevelt's internment of Japanese Americans during World War II must never be excused, though it was errantly legitimized by the Supreme Court in the Korematsu decision of 1944. Segregation must never be repeated under any guise, though many colleges and universities are attempting to reinstitute this obscenity. It is our obligation to stop this ruinous blight. If we repeat the sins of our past in service to neo-Marxist ideologies, we will betray the priceless legacies of Frederick Douglass and Martin Luther King. These great men understood that monuments not only explicate our past, they also mark our progress. We must learn from history, not destroy it, for if we excise or edit the story of our country, we will dismantle avenues for future growth. I am an evangelical Christian, having come to know Jesus Christ through Bible study, led by fellow cadets at the United States Military Academy at West Point almost 40 years ago. My fellow cadets cared enough for me to show me not only the way to a better life, but the way to eternal peace and fellowship with God. In their treasured company, I learned that while money is used to establish value, it must never be used to establish worth, for worth resides in the individual and is created by God and not by our labors. As Secretary of State, I kept an open Bible on my desk and read from it every day. From its incomparable wisdom, I sought and attained the tools of leadership and the belief in a better world to come. I believe it is the break of dawn in America. We must meet it with purpose, with virtue, and with determination, fortified by our knowledge that our nation is a prime force for good. The present darkness must presage a new day. Our country will persevere through the last remnants of night. We are poised for the resurgence of our nation's spirit. We must heed the call to rebuild America's foundations so that our children and their posterity may rejoice in a land that must always be a beacon to the entire world. Pillars for Freedom is a book that must be studied. It is one of the most important books on conservative values and policies that has ever been written. My journey after service in the Trump administration has been enriched by my association with the author of this book. I came to know Richard through an introduction after the publication of his articles on national security and his book on China policy, America's #1 Adversary, which he co-authored with Vice Admiral John Poindexter and Robert Mclain, who served as assistants to the President for National Security Affairs during the Reagan presidency. Richard and I worked together on many important policy papers and speeches that I presented within our country and abroad. The chapters on nuclear weapons policy, economic security, and other sections of this book derive in part from this work. At a young age, Richard made outstanding contributions to our nation's security policies, for he served 4 assistants to the President for National Security Affairs and 3 secretaries of the Navy. In the White House, Richard directed America's audacious response in the tanker Ipaponte hostage incident, in which an oil tanker loaded with millions of gallons of crude threatened grave environmental damage to America's East Coast. Richard wrote Ronald Reagan's principal defense address, delivered during his first term in office, for the recommissioning of the battleship USS New Jersey on December 28, 1982. Later, Richard would create, with Ambassador Robert Keating, the Food for Progress Initiative, which has become one of our nation's most important international food aid programs. Serving in the Department of the Navy, Richard originated its International Program Office and its Technology Transfer and Security Assistance Review Board, which exist to this day. Richard received 2 presidential letters of commendation. While still in his 20s, Richard became our nation's youngest recipient of the Department of the Navy's highest civilian honor, the Distinguished Civilian Service Award. Life, however, often does not follow an even or predictable course. Richard was gravely disabled in January 1994, but fought back over a course of decades to regain his health. Through his journey, Richard has come to a profound understanding of the juncture of national security policy, world history, religion, and moral philosophy. I believe his insights, as recorded in this book, are unequaled and must become a touchstone for the Republican Party. Paramount in Richard's conception of conservatism is that the principles that built our country are for everyone, not just people who are of the same race, religion, creed, background, or economic status. Spanning 5 decades, Richard's trek toward truth reaches its zenith in this glorious work. I pray that its many messages touch every American. The first major product of my collaboration with Richard was my speech of July 26, 2021, concerning the virtues of a conservative, given at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library and Museum as part of their series titled A Time for Choosing. As follows in this introduction are words taken from that address. I record them, for they represent the core of the issues we face. The American family, the faith we have in God and country and hard work, fused with moral courage and introspection, built our nation into the greatest force for good the world has ever known. Unless we act now to assert faith and morality, our country cannot be strong. And if America is not strong, the world will be at the mercy of tyrants and enter an era we dare not imagine. I am forever grateful I came of age to serve my country during the presidency of Ronald Reagan, whom Richard knew well. 4 decades ago, before my appointment to the United States Military Academy at West Point, I studied the life of my future Commander-in-Chief. Ronald Reagan came to define my conception, and that of my entire class, of what it means to be an American. Though Ronald Reagan oversaw the rebuilding of America's military, he did so in order that our nation would attain peace through strength. Our 40th president hated war. He thus set an indelible standard that graduates of West Point must always be soldiers of peace. Faith has been our nation's strength. Without God's grace, it is immensely difficult for a soldier to lead his brothers and sisters into battle, for the sacrifices that may be demanded exceed any recompense in this world. To those serving in harm's way, it is the certain knowledge of everlasting life after this existence that conveys undaunted courage to the weary and implacable resolve to the reticent. This is the truth George Washington understood when he commanded a force of farmers, hunters, and merchants to victory over the greatest army and navy in the world. This is the wisdom Ronald Reagan expressed when he defeated the undefeatable, the evil empire that was the Soviet Union, without war, but with a heart full of faith. We must draw on these immortal examples if we are to meet the grave challenges we now face as a people. To reclaim America, there is no more important research than the churches, synagogues, mosques, and temples that grace our land. There is no more important need than to hear their voices state, "We must return to our moral core, lest all be lost." When I was elected to Congress, made director of the Central Intelligence Agency, and later confirmed as Secretary of State, my thoughts concerning the challenges I would face placed before me President Reagan's image, for he exemplified a nobility of spirit, without which no leader can command. President Reagan's statecraft informed what President Trump and I did to curtail Iran's nuclear abilities. It also provided the template for our actions to contain Vladimir Putin. Unfortunately, what we accomplished has been cast aside by the deep state that is Washington. In their clandestine negotiations with Iran, and in their elimination of our sanctions to inhibit Russia from supplying natural gas to Germany, they put our world at risk. America must restore its character, its leadership, and its exceptionalism. The enunciation of faith is paramount. Our proclamation within the halls of power that God's relationship is with the individual and not the collective is essential. We, as conservatives, need to communicate our belief that everyone is endowed with dignity that must be respected, because we all bear the mark of the Creator. This principle is the means to bring our divided country together without hatred or acrimony. It is also an idea that statists reject. This is their Achilles heel and is revealed by the actions of privileged elites who applaud what they themselves would not do, as they use and take advantage of those they pretend to support. True conservatism in America declined after the Reagan presidency, the administration of which I was a part brought grit, populism, and disruptive innovation to revivify conservative principles. Too many times we have forgotten that our greatest gift to other nations is our example, not our force of arms. At home, we have tarnished our institutions and have compromised our belief in limited government and the necessity of the separation of powers. We have allowed our courts to legislate, the executive to dictate, and Congress to exceed the bounds of its constitutional authorities. Chicago, New York, and especially Washington symbolize a dysfunction that is grasped by friend and foe alike. The present crisis cannot be papered over. To move forward, we should not shirk any aspect of our history nor feel ashamed, for we have overcome, we have prevailed, and we have forsworn that which is corruptive of America's most reverent ideals. Joy and hope must transcend our nation's present deterioration and discord. It is with this understanding and respect for our past that we must once again openly profess our faith, our devotion to our families, and proclaim, unapologetically, the words, "I am an American." We must not look upon our opponents in anger, for it is both ablative to virtue and corrosive to judgment. James Madison, the father of our Constitution, believed that both openness and boldness, but not rancor, were vital for effective leadership. Abraham Lincoln did not look upon his many adversaries and detractors in fury, but in righteousness, for it was in righteousness that King David thanked a loving God, who fortified and ennobled him. Psalm 41 verse 12 recites David's gratitude. "Because of my integrity you uphold me and set me in your presence forever." Today, many politicians state publicly that integrity is priceless. Is this the reason so many demonstrate they cannot afford it? Virtues are developed through God's grace and are the foundation of our republic and of all human happiness. Frederick Douglass stated, "The life of the nation is secure only while the nation is honest, truthful, and virtuous." No truer statement has ever been spoken. The antidote to strife is virtue. America's virtues are not represented by our wealth. Our virtues are our wealth. America is strongest when we act according to our founding documents, which faith has imbued. We are weakest when we disregard this priceless heritage. Narratives have replaced reality. Deprecating fictions concerning the establishment of our nation are presented as fact. Rather than seek truth, those who seek power demand subservience to stories propagated by disingenuous elites and spewed by unscrupulous politicians enabled by the internet and social media. The result is a nation separated from truth, but bound by narratives that superficially support the dispossessed, but actually enrich America's new ruling class, who believe they are entitled to control the lives of others, though they often have trouble controlling their own. This Politburo of false virtue believes they are smarter than everyone else, but in their arrogance, this wealthy and privileged group betrays itself to the destitute, for no government, no elite, and no authority has ever created prosperity and happiness by making itself lord over men and women born free. Radicals hope to take from us the joy and pride we have in our country. We must not let them. Where there is no joy or pride, hope is forfeit. Imagine a proud mother of 2 daughters born into slavery who perished establishing a new route for the Underground Railroad. What would this courageous woman not have given to see her children raised in the freedom and opportunities of today, rather than to the life of burden she knew? Further, imagine a Choctaw warrior in 1918 serving in the American Expeditionary Force during the assault on Forest Farm in France. Aware from his elders' oral histories of the broken treaties and grievous losses suffered by his people, aware that Native Americans could not get vote in our national elections, this incomparably selfless man nonetheless used his tribe's unique language to confound the German force before him, becoming one of our nation's first code talkers. This gallant action helped bring victory to an American army. By his deeds, this Choctaw soldier demonstrated that while the past informs the present, it must never be an obstacle to a better, more vibrant future. We owe it to all Americans who lived and died under the yoke of oppression to celebrate what we have and what we have become. History is the sum total of actions, both good and bad, brave and irresolute. It cannot be parsed and strained to remove parts that are offensive, for to do so is to rob our past of the richness and complexity that built the road to our present day. These two stories, to which the names of many of our forebears may be applied, represent the giants who formed the foundation upon which our nation rests. I ask you to imagine what these two persons would not have given to have been part of the America of today. Yet I do not believe either would have given up their place in history if in so doing they would have altered our country's character. Collapse from within is possible. Race and open borders have become levers for the left to sow societal disunity. Immigration without assimilation, illicit drugs, human trafficking, disputed elections, and inflationary risk have become tools to disassemble our republic. In what must be an attempt at national suicide, we allow MS-13 assassins to pass through our borders with gang tattoos covering their faces, while we are lectured by our media for our obstinacy. The histories of our heroes should instead be taught so students may comprehend the potential for excellence that exists within every person. Dr. Norman Borlaug, born in 1914, created the Green Revolution. President Carter wrote that Dr. Borlaug did more than any individual in history in the battle to end world hunger, for he developed the high-yield wheat and agricultural practices that averted starvation in Mexico, India, Pakistan, China, and Africa. In destitute villages the world over, Norman Borlaug did not see race, religion, or color. He asked but one question: do these people have enough food? In so doing, he saved more lives than any person who ever lived. He was the recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the Congressional Gold Medal, and countless accolades from around the globe. Yet his accomplishments are taught infrequently, if at all, in our public schools. This must change. We dwell on our faults as if they were unique and not ubiquitous to every land that has ever existed. When will we teach our children of America's triumphs? Our country is tearing itself apart, and for what? Anarchy and the elimination of our police cannot but bring us death and fear. Discrimination cannot be fought with more discrimination. And the form of socialism that is now being praised by woke politicians and billionaires will bring our democracy to its knees by culling dissenting opinions while concealing harmful biases in search engines and in social media platforms. If we do not act to secure our elections, demand voter identification, and end online manipulation, we will be governed by forces beyond our control. Who will benefit? Not America, but an array of global interests that has amassed power and uncountable wealth through their usurpation of the American dream. This is done by selling or commoditizing the engines of our economy. China has infiltrated Hollywood, academia, our technology companies, and the corporations that control America's media, publishing, and news sources. Our strengths have been turned against us. Communist influence must be eliminated in our country, root and branch.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?